Hi, I'm Dave Ingebretson. Leroy Hyatt and I would like to welcome you to another edition of Fly Tying, the Angler's Art. And as usual, we have a mixed bag of flies to tie for you today. We're going to start out with a really, truly classic wet fly.
Old fly.
Well, you don't see enough wet flies. We're going to talk about wet flies a little bit and tie one. Then we'll be tying a sparkle spinner and finishing up with a big old zonker.
Ugly zonker.
All right. Tell us about the wet fly. The wet fly is going to be called the Wickham's Fancy.
Wickham's Fancy.
And let me say, before you tell people about it, that we wanted to tie one of the classic wet flies because I think most people have forgotten about them. And they're still good flies, and there are hundreds of wet fly patterns. Oh. The only reason I suggested a Wickham's Fancy is because I always liked the name.
Oh.
The Wickham's Fancy, you know, that's a nice sounding name, but the Wickham's Fancy is a very classic old Eastern pattern where all of this got started.
Remember the old herders books?
Oh, sure.
That's basically all you ever saw.
Oh, yeah. But this fly is very well known. And we could have tied any of a number of wet flies, but Wickham's Fancy, how can you go wrong tying a Wickham's Fancy? Tell us what you use on it.
For a hackle, we will use a light ginger hackle. The body will be a gold flat tinsel. We'll rib it with a gold wire, and I'm going to do this a little differently maybe than you've seen it before, Dave. The wings will be a natural duck quill wing, and the thread will be the standard 6/0 black tying thread. I have a 1X long, size 12. I've pinched the barb on it, and I'll go ahead and get the thread started and dress the hook. Now this fly has no tail on it at all, of which a lot of the old wet flies didn't have tails on of any kind. No. For the tinsel, I'm going to use a flat gold, and I'm going to use a medium size. And the gold wire for the rib, we'll tie that in back here in the back right now. Well, that's like a big coil spring.
One thing I know that we do differently from our previous experience together is you generally single wrap your tinsel bodies, and I double wrap mine. I tie mine in at the front and wind it to the back and then back over to the front. You tie yours in at the back and single wrap it. And it's just a toss-up, which way you prefer.
What I'm going to do differently now is this fly does call for a ginger hackle to be palmered through it, but I have not tied that ginger hackle on. Now I'll wrap my tying thread forward.
You just tied in the body material.
And now I'm tying in the flat gold tinsel.
And
I'm just running it forward.
And you have the rib tied in.
Rib is tied in, but not the palmered hackle. Stop it in room enough to give me a section to put the duck quill on. And then we'll tie in the hackle. Tie it in, strip the stem.
This really is different than most people would tie in the palmer. They put the palmer in by the tail so they could wrap forward.
But when you finish this with the gold wire, you'll see how much stronger it will be.
Okay.
Now what I'm going to do is just rib to the rear. My tying thread is still to the front. Come back here to the back. Now I'm going to take this gold wire and I'm going to tie down this hackle with that gold wire.
Okay.
I'll take about 3 wraps around that, and then I'm just going to wrap my gold wire ribbing forward. Now each time that ribbing goes around, it's binding down the stem of that hackle.
Well, that's a neat trick.
So it will definitely make that fly last considerably
longer. The normal
longer.
tendency, of course, would be to catch a fish and snag the hackle and it's
away
all
it
over.
goes, yeah.
That is a very good trick.
Then I'll get rid of this hackle. Now that wire will hold that hackle in the rear. There isn't a problem with that coming apart at all. Make sure that that's all tied down.
If you were worried about it, you could actually put a drop of head cement on it.
You sure could. Now the duck quills that I'm going to use, they're a match pair.
Natural gray.
Natural gray. You can see that they're primary wing feathers, but this section from the stem over is the side we'll use, the same with this. If you didn't use them that way, they'd never match up.
No, you need to get one feather out of the right wing and one out of the left wing, so you have opposites. And of course you can tie either wet or dry wings depending on how you put them together. And now, if you were tying a dry fly, you'd have the concave sides together, convex sides together, so they'd flare out.
But now I'm going to put the cave sides together, so it makes one basic
right.
wing.
And again, now remember, whenever you're using especially quill wings, you want to use that basic grip, make a loose loop of thread over it, and then squeeze very tightly and pull straight down.
So I go around through my fingers and pull down. You can see the feather move as it tightens around it.
And then you do that again several times, but you never go to the good side of the feather from those that first wrap. And that should keep the feather in perfect shape.
Doesn't want to trim off very well there. And then I'll just build a little head.
And of course, this is very characteristic of the wet flies with the down style wing, and most of the old classics all had the quill wings.
Because it was readily available.
Sure.
I mean, everybody had it.
Yeah.
Then I'll put a little head cement.
What's unusual about the fly, I suppose, is the palmering and the fact that it has no other hackle at all. And by today's tastes and standard, that's probably a fairly bright, sparkly fly.
Yes, it is. But it would be a good attractor pattern.
Well, it's a good attractor pattern, and it's typical of some of the old classic patterns. And I guess the thing is, we just encourage you to go back and look at some of these old patterns. There's all kinds of them. And they're as good today as they were then, but we've kind of gotten into nymphs, and we've forgotten about the real wet flies. Easy to fish.
Oh, very easy.
Fish cast quartering across stream and down and let them swing and give them little twitches, and that's about it.
Well, there's a Wickham's Fancy. Has a body of flat gold tinsel, a rib of gold wire. The hackle is a light ginger. The wing is natural duck quill.
Now we're going to tie a typical spent wing spinner. This one's called the sparkle spinner, and it's typical of any spent wing spinner except for the winging material will be a little bit different, and that's where the name came from, the sparkle spinner.
And the tail material.
Oh, that's right.
Might be different.
Tell us what you're going to use to tie the fly.
Okay, for the tail, we will use a gold-colored microfiber. They come in a lot of different colors. It's just match whatever color you're coming off with. To match that tailing material, we'll go with a light tan dubbing. And this is where the spinner gets its name, the sparkle spinner, from the pearl crystal flash. And for the thread, we'll use a standard A-dot dry thread. And
the point here is you can tie this in any color and size to match whatever natural spinner that you're trying to imitate.
Yes.
It's the technique and the materials that make this unique. And you tie it any color and size.
And tan seems to be...
Well, tan and I like olive. Rusty brown too, and olive. But rusty brown is a good. A lot of spinners are rusty brown.
Now, to start with, most mayfly spinners like this will have only two tails. Well, you'll see the tail when I put it on in just a minute. If I were to tie that on right now, I would never get them separated.
It'd be hard to separate.
Never. So what I'm going to do is just put a very small ball of dubbing right here. It doesn't take very much at all. And then we can tie on those microfibers.
And of course, the tails on a spinner are fairly long.
Yes, they are.
So you don't want to cut them as short as you would on a normal dry fly.
That's correct. Well, no, I pulled off three. I'm
now, you know, with the microfibettes, you can either use them singly to put in a pair of tails, or I've seen it done too where you'll have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 on each side and have split tails, but it'll represent 2 tails, but it'll be more than 1 fibette on each side.
Now you can see how fine those are. They are extremely fine.
We talk about microfibettes, but you know, if you can't get microfibettes, you can get go to the hardware store and get a paintbrush with either white or clear bristles, and nylon bristles, and then you can color them with waterproof markers in a variety of ways. You can also put stripes on them like grizzly or whatever, and the nylon paintbrush material works very, very well.
I tied them just a little bit long, but I haven't trimmed those butts off yet, so I can come in and very simply do that. Now I'm going to go ahead and dub, and there could be a lot of different ways, like with all flies, of tying this fly. Now, we were talking earlier, you said that you would tie the wing on first.
Yeah, normally I tie the spent wings on and then go back and do the rest. There's no particular reason for it, I guess. It's just that I'm
Just
in the
once you
habit,
get in the
when I
habit of
tie dry
doing it.
flies, I always start with the wings, and so when I tie this spinner, I started with the wings. But as you'll see, it works just fine the other way, too.
Oh. And we'll just come on up. Ran out of dubbing. That's got a lot of the guard hairs left in it. I'm going to go ahead and trim those off when we're done. I don't know how necessary it is to get rid of those guard hairs, but it makes the fly look a little better.
Yeah, I usually trim them off when we're
Yeah.
done. If I try not to have any in there, but there always are some.
Oh, yeah. Then I'll take a few strands of this crystal flash.
I think that's the key word, a few strands.
Yes.
We don't want a big, bright hunk of stuff in there.
No.
Spinner wings are very delicate, but you can see where this pearl crystal flash will really represent the sparkly wings very well, because natural spinners do have very glossy, glistening wings.
Yes. And what I've done is I have 4 strands only. That's all I have is 4 strands. I'm going to figure 8 right here just to get it done. I'm going to clip this. I don't know what the length is. I can always come back later and do that. That won't be a problem. I know those are much too long. And then I'll just go on with the dubbing. I want to go over that section where we just tied the wing in, plus come on up to the front to finish off that
when
head
you
area.
do that, when you go between the wings and kind of figure 8 with the dubbing, that makes a very natural looking hump.
Oh,
The
sure
natural
does.
insect does have an enlargement right
does.
there on the thorax. And so that's a very realistic thing to do.
Plus that will let you divide those wings out the way you want them to be
Oh, sure.
as you go between them. And I'll just finish that off right there. Got a little bit too much dubbing. It's a nice thing about using a whole lot of dubbing either. It's a lot easier to get rid of. Now I'm going to just pull those wings out of the way. They're attached in. There isn't any problem with them coming out. Trim that one little spot I have there off. Then I'm going to come here and just put a quick whip finish on. I'm going to clip that off. And now I'm going to stand these up. You don't want to get them too short, but you sure don't want them too long
that's true.
either, not at all.
Well, you need to be observant of the bugs you're trying to
Yes,
imitate,
correct.
so that you give your artificials the characteristics that those flies have.
Now that may still be a little bit too long, so I'll come back in and clip those one more time.
That's what I was going to say.
And there's that spinner fly.
Why don't you
the
put a dark
sparkle
background
spinner.
behind that?
I
That's a
will
little
do
light
that.
to see against
And
that.
I'll rotate that around so you can see more what it's like. There you can see the 2 little tails.
Look at right there. Look at the wings sparkle.
Yep.
That's very
It really
realistic
and
looking.
there you can see
look,
the tails very
look at
well.
how sparse that is. Only 4 fibers, but it's exactly like the veining in these sparkly wings. I think that's an outstanding
works
spinner
very
pattern.
well,
Outstanding.
yes. And I can come through here and trim off some of those. Be careful you don't trim the tail off. Get rid of some of those fibers that are sticking out. And there's a sparkle spinner. Of course, we'd put head cement on it, but we'll go ahead with it for now. Nothing more than tan dubbing or match the hatch. It is a matching microfibette tail and pearl crystal flash for the wing.
Now again, we're going to completely switch gears and go from a delicate little spinner to a great big streamer, the Zonker.
Yes.
And I don't know where the name Zonker came from, but
neither.
it really is aptly named. This fly is a Zonker. It's a streamer pattern, imitates a small bait fish, and is very, very effective.
And the material in it is what makes it so effective, the
ma-
movement
right,
of the
right.
rabbit. Yes.
Tell us what those materials are.
Okay, we'll use black rabbit. Now, this will be a black zonker. However, you can tie them in a lot of different colors, natural, yellows, whatever you want. This will be black. The body material will be a pearl tubing, mylar tubing they call it. I have 2 different colored threads here. The red will be used to bind the tubing down at the rear of the hook. The black will be used at the front. And then we'll use a soft hackle, black hackle, for the hackle all the way up front.
Now this rabbit we talked about This is rabbit fur still on the skin. It's cut into strips.
Right.
And you can either cut it yourself or you can buy it that way.
Buy it
but
already
why don't you
stripped.
tell us about it? Well, you can wait till we get there, but there are a couple different ways to cut strips.
Yes.
And you want to make sure the fur is going the right direction. Let's wait and talk about that when we get there. I was a little premature.
All right, I'm starting out with the red thread. Then I'm going to take a piece of this mylar tubing. Now, part of this tubing is going to be hanging out the rear of the hook to become the tail. It will be shredded. And then I'll measure the front part here with my thumbnail and cut it off.
Now, this also goes under the name of mylar piping because originally dressmakers used it for piping around things they'd sew.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's where it came from. And then we just adapted it to fly tying.
Okay. Now, I'll pull the cotton center out of this. You can see what's in it. Now that tube is totally hollow. Now, this fly could also be weighted.
Could be weighted, and a lot of people at least used to use underbodies.
And they'll form it.
I have seen underbodies made out of foam, or I think the original called for cut out of a tin can and cut to a minnow shape, a double, and folded over.
So to make a belly.
So you had a deep belly tapering towards the back.
I'm not
and
sure
it
it's all
gave shape to the fly, and it's a lot of monkey business to do it. And I don't personally think that it makes a lot of difference.
No, I really don't either. I don't take the time to do it. Now, I have frayed the back half or the back tail section of this mylar tubing. That will act as a little tail. It will breathe. It will carry on in the water. Now, we were talking about the different way that this rabbit can be stripped. Now, you can see, I hope you can see, this is the skin side. This is the hair side. Now, the hair is going the same direction as the strip itself. This is the kind of fur that you're looking for to make streamers.
What's the alternative?
If it was cut the opposite direction, like they have a saltwater fly called a bunny leech, then it's cut the opposite direction. As you wrap it on the hook, the hair's now going the right direction. You can make it fan to the back. This will also work.
A great fly in Alaska and in other places too. It's not just salt water.
Anything large, you bet. Now again, here there's different ways to tie this. I'm going to go ahead and lay this on. I'm measuring it out, how long I want it.
How long do you want it?
I want it to go back behind that tail, the silver tail, quite a ways because I want that movement that fly is going to give me.
Equal to the length of the shank of the hook, or a little less
behind
than
the wing?
that,
No, a little less than that. In fact, I've got it a little bit long, but that's okay because I'm going to come in here and trim this at an angle on the front of this fly to make it easier to tie in.
Strip off a little hair then so you can get at the leather.
Yes, right. So now I'm going to come back here. This is going to be tied down at the rear of the hook. So I have to separate this hair to find where I want to be, taking care that you got your measurement up here still.
Now you're tying it down at the front first, aren't
Nope,
you?
I'm tying it down at the rear first. I have that hair separated where I can go ahead and tie that down.
Well, I suppose tying it down at the rear first, you don't have to work around another bobbin hanging down there in front.
And then I'm going to whip finish it. It's having a tendency to want to fall back in on itself.
Now it tickles me to see you whip finish it because try that with your whip finishing tool.
Well, they have some longer whip
that's
tools
why I like
that
to
will work.
teach people how to whip finish by hand because there are times you can't use that tool. And
now I'm going to come to the front.
I never use the tool.
I'm going to come to the front.
Switch threads.
And switch threads, and I'm going to tie a black thread in. Take a couple of soft wraps here and get all that tubing, piping bound down. Get rid of my extra thread here. And now here's my rabbit strip up here in front. I'll tie it down.
Well, as you said before, the beauty of this fly is the tremendous action it's going to have. Not only does it look realistic like a minnow with the scale effect of the mylar piping, but when that skin gets wet, it becomes very, very mobile, and the hair, and it looks like it's a swimming minnow.
Yes.
And again, to tie it in a variety of colors to achieve the effect you want.
And then we'll tie on a soft black hackle here in the front, just to act as legs, give it a little bit more movement again.
I've caught lake trout up in Canada on a variation of this fly.
Oh, really? I've also tied this fly in with a muddler head, but weighting it, but with a natural rabbit body then instead of the color. Use them around Montana and Wyoming a lot.
So the Zonker is not just a specific pattern, but it's a category of flies that can be tied in a variety of colors. You got a black zonker and a white zonker and a yellow zonker and a gray zonker and
tan zonker.
Yeah.
But you can see how soft that is. You just blow on it and it just breathes like crazy. I'll go ahead and put a whip finish on it. Now, a difference in the way you could tie this fly is you could come to the front. You could tie that rabbit strip down here first, let your bobbin hang, go to the back, tie it in back there, whatever way you're most comfortable
I usually tie off the body in the back, and then either you put a little whip finish on it or let the bobbin hang, go to the front, tie in the strip, then take it back and tie in the back of the strip. I don't know why I do it that way.
It's just whatever you get used to.
Yeah. I guess I just like to have the strip tied down in front, and so I can pull it tightly,
and then fight it through in the back.
But again, it points out the fact that there aren't many right and wrong ways. There are different ways to achieve the same results, and
that's why we have so many variations of everything. People doing it differently. I don't have any black rabbit, so I'm going to tie it with a different color. Suddenly it becomes something new that you invented. It may have been around for 50 years before that, but that's the way these variations hit. Now there's a black zonker. We use nothing more than a silver piping or tubing for the body, tied down with a strip of black rabbit, tied front and rear. Use red thread in the rear, black in the front, and a soft black hackle in the front for legs.
And we just tied that fly, Leroy, or you tied that fly in a number 6 4X long, but we need to stress that it can be tied in any size.
Oh, bigger.
Large for saltwater, it can be tied smaller, and as we've said, in a variety of colors. But you know, maybe we ought to talk a little bit about how you fish streamers. Now, of course, this can be weighted.
Yes, most of them are.
And you don't have to weight it too heavily because the water soaks up, the material soaks up the water, the metallic and all. Depends on how deep you're going to fish it. And in a normal trout stream, you may not want to weight it at all because you'd get hung up on the rocks too much. So that depends on where you're going to fish it. But the standard way of fishing a streamer is kind of across and down, a downstream swing, and just strip the fly and make it swim. But remember, you're not trying to make it imitate a healthy fish, bait fish,
wounded fish,
because
sick fish.
The predators will attack the old and the weak and the sick and the crippled. So you strip it in, you let it sink back, you stop it, you start it, and you make it erratic.
Now, you know, you said you fish the larger sizes mostly in saltwater. And not weighted so heavily for trout stream. I've heard people in Montana say if you're not losing flies, you're not fishing deep enough.
Oh, that's
with
absolutely true too.
So
it just depends on the situation. You need them both ways.
Right.
But if you're fishing in only 2 feet of water or 3 feet of water, you don't want that thing heavily weighted if you're going to swim it through a deep pool. But the point is that it's hard to fish a streamer wrong. Because eventually, if you hit the water, you'll catch a fish on it.
That's right.
But the key is, remember, it's a sick or an injured minnow. Another way to fish it is across the stream with an upstream mend, the idea being to make the minnow or the fly swim down at right angles to the fish so they get a broadside look at it. But don't strip it and make it swim hard.
No.
All right,
although occasionally that will work.
Today we tied the Wickham's Fancy, the Sparkle Spinner, and
the black zonker.
Black zonker. We hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Dave and Leroy have produced 2 90-minute videos covering new and exciting tips on how to make your fly tying better and more effective. They introduce you to everything you need as a beginner and demonstrate helpful techniques for intermediate tiers. Fly Tying Techniques Volumes 1 and 2 are available by calling 1-800-883-0124. Cost of each video is $28.95 plus shipping and handling, or get the 2-volume set for just $52.95. You can also order the programs in this series. Each 90-minute videotape includes 3 programs for just $22.95, plus shipping and handling. To order Fly Tying the Angler's art videos and techniques tapes, call 1-800-883-0124.